Are you listening?
Yes, of course I'm listening.
If you're not listening, I can make you listen. As from this moment, there's no such thing as free will in the entire universe. There's only...
Pull to open.
Pull to open?
Yes, and what do you do?
Well, it's called Randomizer, and it operates under a very complex scientific principle called potluck.
You have absolutely no sense of responsibility. You're capricious, arrogant, self-opinionated, irrational, and you don't even know where we're going.
Exactly.
Here come the drums!
Theta Sigma, 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 Theta Sigma.
Hello, and welcome to a random episode of Pull to Open. Once again, despite all our hot takes on the new season, a random quest through the history of Doctor Who. All of the stories covered in random order. My name is Chris Taylor.
Just for a change, I'm Pete Paschal. And Chris and I, yes, we are those two journalists, those two guys, those two Doctor Who fans who do this podcast week after week, almost like we're in a repeating loop of time.
I know, it's funny that, isn't it? Almost like the loop is getting shorter.
I want to risk that this might be a chronic hysteresis, not a time loop, and let's bust our way out of it by updating the fine listeners on where we've been lately.
Yes,
maybe you can handle that, Chris.
I can handle that, and to get out of a chronic hysteresis, one must start by saying, "Oh, blast!" As we knew from when we went to Meglos. But we're not at Meglos now. But we have been to a few Tom Baker stories in the past, previously on Pull to Open, aeons ago. Many, many moons ago, we did The Androids of Tara, our first leap into the Key to Time series. And then we did The Pirate Planet, the Douglas Adams joint that we both loved.
It was a long period between those, by the way.
Yeah.
Androids of Tara was one of our first random podcasts. I mean, it felt like one of our first. It was probably a little bit into the show, but I do remember it was also one of the first podcasts we uploaded to YouTube.
Oh,
so
yes.
That's a little bit of Pull to Open lore for you guys. Because for the longest time, it was like we only had one or two up, and Androids of Tara was one of them.
That must have been right around when we start recording video. And if you dig back into the archives, at a certain point, I start moving. Very weird. I look at like a drawn character until then I'm animated. But anyway, on this current random journey, 3 stories ago, amazingly, the Randomizer, brought to you by Disney Plus, took us to the church on Ruby Road, to what was then, long ago, long before this season began, was the most recent Doctor Who story. And the Randomizer took us right there. 2 stories ago, perhaps anticipating that Dot and Bubble was on the schedule, the Randomizer took us to the Doctor's previous escapades in racism and time travel in Thin Ice. And then the Randomizer said, "Hey, screw this! I'm going on holiday. I'm going to Disneyland." But then it ended up in North Wales, the Shangri-La holiday camp, concentration camp, no, holiday camp, for Delta and the Bannermen.
What the hell was that?
Yes.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah. Well, we did mention that the founder of Butlins, on which that Shangri-La camp was based, was from the part of the world where they invented concentration camps. And I was refuting the claim that there might be any connection, that Butlins looks like a concentration camp of any sort. But yeah, it just looks to Americans now like a regular motel.
Well, the Bannermen are kind of, kind of requisite Nazis for the
exactly
in the story. So
requisite Nazis. Doctor Who's got this whole Nazi wardrobe that you just reach into, pluck some of those out. But anyway, after Delta and the Bannermen, we jumped on our motorbike. I forget what the amazing motorbike was, and the Vincent. Yes, the Vincent. You might have thought that it would then take us to Vincent and the Doctor, but no, the Randomizer had some urgent business. It was time to take us back to the Key to Time season for a very special episode of Pull to Open, where we go and visit the first episode to star the Randomizer itself. The Randomizer took us to its birth, It took us to season 16, serial number 6, the 666 episode, Armageddon Factor.
That's right. Are you getting it?
Armageddon
Chris?
it. Really getting
doing.
it. Or
Nice.
as I said last time when we got here in the Delta and the Bannerman, Armageddon out of here. Yep, thumbs up on
There you
YouTube there.
Yep. It's kind of funny. So we did, like you said, Androids of Tara, Pirate Planet, and I guess the randomizer thinks we've seen enough of this that it's like, okay, you get it. Let's cut right to the end of the Key to Time season.
Yeah.
And
yada, yada, yada. And then the Shadow and the Black Guardian. Boom. And I was born, says the randomizer.
Right.
So,
cut right to the origin.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get into that. We'll get into all of that. But
what's that I hear?
Uh-oh.
Is it the Whomoji challenge?
What's that I hear? It's the Wambulance, as I complain once again about being subjected to the torture of the Whomoji challenge.
You get the torture. That's right. This is the part of the show where I get to torture Chris with emojis. These are carefully selected emojis from one of our listeners that represent the title of a Doctor Who story. And sometimes they also involve the content of that story. And we love them. They're great little brain teasers. And Chris's brain is ripe for some teasing. He's always up for it. I got to say, I got to give kudos to your brain for always being up for this, even if they might not always be so quick on putting the emojis together.
You know, I'm really only doing this on behalf of Amnesty International so that we can log enough data to prove that the Whomoji challenge should be registered as a form of torture. Internationally recognized as such.
Once it does that, we will definitely go rogue. Oh,
hey.
You see what I did there?
Yeah, I see what you did there. Just to locate you in time and space, listeners and viewers, Peter's not yet seen Rogue. When we're recording
You're
this,
holding that over me, Mr. Screen Guy.
Exactly. I gotta get my torture back. Yes, I have seen Rogue. You, listener, have seen Rogue.
They've definitely seen Rogue. I think at this point we might even be at the end of the season, but
I haven't seen that.
Rogue
yet.
was one of those. But let's not digress. Let's not get too far down titles of shows that
Rogue One. I see what you did there.
Oh,
hey.
What did I ever? But it's time to get some titles out of you, and I'm going to feed you some emojis that correspond to that title. So are you ready, sir?
Never, but let's do it anyway.
All right. First emoji is a clock, one that shows the time 8 o'clock.
Could that be relevant, I wonder?
Perhaps, or perhaps it's a bit of a mislead. The next emoji is a queen, basically a female face with a crown. And the face is Caucasian. Next emoji, the Indian flag. So, the country of India, the flag of India.
Interesting. Okay.
Next emoji, a blonde white man with the face palm.
Wow.
And next emoji, a dark-haired white man with the face palm.
Double face palm.
And that is it. I should have said it's 5 emojis.
Goodness me.
And here it is in the chat for you to have a good look at.
You know,
Let me know if you need some hints.
I was feeling so confident on those first two. I was like, oh, Time in the Running. Is it? Is it?
It's Time in the Run!
Oh, my goodness! Oh!
Yeah. Nice. Good guess.
Ooh.
Like Rani, I think the Queen and the Indian flag, maybe that's a bit of a giveaway. Because that could be only if you put together Rani, then that's 2 stories you've narrowed it down to.
Ah, the Indian flag, Rani. What's the connection?
Well, Queen and Indian flag, so an Indian queen, right?
Is Rani?
I thought you knew that.
I did not know that. I was suddenly I was like, oh crap, it's not Time in the Rani. Maybe it's. And then I was thinking about when have we been in India? Right? There was that sort of there was Nepal in flux. Does that count? It's going back.
Too, right?
Demons the
Yeah.
Punjab, exactly. But what's the Queen? And then the double face palm. Maybe the double face palm represents that this was the story where I rage quit.
Well, it's clearly, in sort of looking at it, it's like Colin Baker to McCoy.
Yes.
The face palm's a little weird because because Colin Baker wasn't in it, you
He's
kind of
hiding
have
his
the face
face.
stuff. So it's
I
a bit of
love
a
it.
face palm regeneration for sure. I remember in our
man.
regeneration episode, we kind of disqualified it from even ranking as
Wow.
far as like the top regenerations. So
I love this. This is not torture. This is actually going to set Amnesty International's case back because I really enjoy this. This is actually affirming that I was right to feel rage about Time and the Rani when I watched it and to quit the show altogether. Thank you for asserting that.
well, thank you, CT Tig, for submitting this on Apple Podcasts in your review. We read the review last time. It was such a great review. I won't do it again, but thank you also for the numerous emojis. And you too, listener, can submit emojis for any Doctor Who story that you want to do that for. So go ahead, figure out what emojis correspond to the title of the Doctor Who story. Go ahead and send it to us in the form of a review. You could put it in the title of the review. You could put it in the substance review. Doesn't really matter, but that's the best way to submit these emojis. We're going to get to all of them. We've got a nice, a healthy amount from our last few reviews. And keep them coming. That's all I have to say. So this has been great. And we'll get to more of these at a future episode.
And if you're on Spotify, keep voting. That's right. You citizens of Spotify live in a democracy. And if you pull up from the bottom of the screen right now, you'll see a poll. What's that? Yes, it's poll to open. The best dad joke in the universe. And the polls are still open. But if you pull up from the bottom of the screen right now, you can vote on the Armageddon Factor. What you thought of that using our rating system, which we'll explain at the end of the episode in a very timey-wimey way. Skip forward if you want to understand them all. But we have some past ratings now. The polls are still open, so these results can change. Time can be rewritten. But let's look at what you thought of Thin Ice.
Yeah, it'd be hard to rewrite this one. I'll just say that. Because there is a very clear winner among our ratings for Thin Ice. And that is the same rating that you and I gave the episode, which, of course, is the Dalek.
That's right.
It is the wildly successful majority choice of everyone who voted, and just over 50%. It's about 55% of the vote.
Yes,
Dalek. Wow.
a majority, not just a plurality for Dalek. It is a good episode of Doctor Who. 9% of you said Viscount Banger, the best of the best. More of you said Professor Hater.
A decent showing there, almost 20%,
Yeah.
about 18.2% there on the Professor Hater.
I guess people know likey the retread of Beast Below in Thin Ice. That might be what that is. That might also be the reason for the Ogron. And then 9%.
Be the weenie racist. The racist was pretty weenie in this one. I'll just say that.
Yes. Yes, so these people obviously wanted a bigger racist for the Doctor to punch. And then 9% said Lady Cassandra as well. You really didn't like the paper-thin plot, you thought, but you had a fun time at the London Frost Fair.
Yeah, we did too, with all of our mum. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go ahead and go back to that podcast and listen to what they named various drinks in the London Frost Fairs.
That's right. And in the meantime, we will keep mum on that.
Alrighty, of course, you can also vote in our polls. We keep them open. So if you have thoughts on the Armageddon Factor before we get to it, go ahead. Vote now. Just slide up from the bottom of your screen. We'll remind you again at the bottom of the show. Something I was reminded of recently, though, folks, is that there are numerous ways you can support the show. And when I support the show, I mean financially. You can do various things to ensure that you get this content week after week, whether it's the current season, whether we're off the season, we're doing our random episodes like this one. Streaming services aren't free, folks. We could definitely use some help to sort of keep bringing you this. But we often talk about YouTube, and that's a great way to support the show by becoming a true companion, or even a Viscount if you'd like to join us on the show, which is a slightly higher level. But either one of those, we'd be grateful. And also on YouTube, there's a super thanks. So that what
Super
that is,
thanks.
it's a one-time thing. So if you're a true companion or a Viscount, it's a monthly fee, but the super thanks is a one-shot deal. Now, at the monthly fee level, you're going to get the podcast a day early. That's your benefit. But the super thanks would be really grateful for. You can also check us out on Patreon at patreon.com/pull-to-open and donate there. And there is one more way, which we have never talked about, but our very loyal listener, Zoe Lane, she supports us there. And I was reminded, oh yeah, you can actually support us directly through Spotify. So besides participating in our polls, besides rating the show and the episodes, you can actually pledge however much money you desire to Pull to Open. And you can go ahead and just do that. So just find that. It's a button somewhere.
Yeah.
I found it myself, so I'm sure it's easy to find. Zoe found it. You can too.
That's right. Zoe
and we'd be
Lane just
grateful
became
for
my
that.
favorite name. And yes, see if you too can find the Easter egg buried in Spotify where you can support us. We know you like a challenge as Doctor Who fans. So yeah, just as you're voting in our poll, maybe that's the first level, and you can level up and figure out how to support us on Spotify. Because I've got to admit, I've got no clue.
Well, we do now. Zoe can walk us through it. So
Yes.
we're going to reach out to her. So thank you, Zoe. But now I
Yes,
think we have to do something.
time to stop stalling like Stallman. It is time to talk about the Armageddon Factor. And the thing that we do every time at the start of our commentaries, we don't just plunge right in like your basic Doctor Who podcast. No, we make sure that you are fully caught up on the story that we are going to talk about by summarizing it for you, because if it was too long and you didn't watch, then you need a TLDW. Too long, Doctor Who. Too long at 6 episodes, the Armageddon Factor. We'll get into the pacing and the question of whether it should be 6 episodes later. But regardless, it is 6 episodes. And in TLDW, one of us summarizes the story in 30 seconds per classic Who episode. And that means that whoever's summarizing this week has a luxurious 3 minutes to summarize this entire story. 3 whole minutes.
Luxurious is not the adjective I would have chosen.
Well, you would say that because it is your turn to do the summarizing, Mr.
Even if it
Patel.
wasn't my turn, I understand the pressures and luxurious. Oh my God. This is funny because it's like we're pacing out our random episodes a bit. So I finished watching the Armageddon Factor actually quite some time ago. And even though there's been some recent episodes where I've done the TLDW and I've sort of thought about it and even rehearsed it here and there, I have seriously not thought about this story in days.
Oh, I love it.
And I completely did not even think about it until we started recording this podcast. Like, oh, right, I'm doing TLDW. So I'm not predicting a strong showing here. So we'll see how this goes. Maybe that's what I need, though. Who knows?
There's plenty of rabbit holes to go down. This is very interesting. I love it. It's seat of the pants, folks. That's how we do it here on Pull to Open. And we'll find out whether this should be registered as a form of torture as well. In the summary, are you ready, sir? Before I give you the countdown, are you ready?
No, but let's do it. Let's just get through this.
All right.
No notes. Dismissed
No
everything
notes.
on the desktop.
Do it live. We'll do it live for your listening pleasure. Ladies and gentle beings, the official Pull to Open summary of the Armageddon Factor in 3 minutes starts in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Dr. Romana and K9 are looking for the 6th and final segment of the Key to Time. They're being led to this planet called Atrios, which is actually a twin planet with this other planet, Zeos, that's super close, and they're actually fighting a war, and it's some kind of nuclear war, and all the people on Atrios are underground, and they come to Atrios, and there's a guy called the Marshal and his buddy Shap, who are basically in charge, so it's military rule, but they've been fighting this war for so long that they have virtually nothing left, so they tell the doctor, hey, help us kill the Zeons. And the doctor's like, well, I'll try to do that for you, but show me a captured Zeon. They don't have any. And then there's this woman, Princess Astra, and her lover Merak, which is they have a secret relationship, and they're basically Astra's kidnapped to go to this place, but it's not on Zeus. It's actually this sort of third planet. It looks almost more like a space station, but she's there. And who's captured her? It's this guy called the Shadow, who's working really hard also to find the sixth segment of the key to time, because the Shadow works for the Black Guardian. So the Doctor and Romana track him to this planet, but first they go to Zeus. And when they get to Zeus, they realize that there are no Zeons on Zeus. They've apparently all been wiped out, and this whole war is being orchestrated by this computer that on some level the Shadow seems to be controlling. And so this whole war, this nuclear war between these two planets is kind of this show to get the sixth segment to the key to time. Now, Atrios has virtually nothing left in terms of weaponry. All their fighters have been wiped out. They have one last ship. It's the old command module, which used to be an escape module from some other ship, but it has armaments. And so the Marshal, who is actually working for the Shadow, he's sort of been hypnotized, and takes that ship, and he goes to launch the missiles on Zeus, which will then sort of trigger this retaliatory strike or something. Basically, both planets will be wiped out by this final thing. So the Doctor, even though he hasn't found the sixth segment yet, in this desperate move, creates his own sixth segment, because they're all geometric shapes of the key to time, uses the key to time loop the Marshal, time loop the Xeon computer room, which is going to blow up everything in this solar system, goes to the third planet, encounters this guy called Drax, who's also a Time Lord who worked for the Marshal and did the computer thing. And so he turns Drax against the Shadow, and they all confront the Shadow. And there's this weird shrink ray stuff that happens, which is a little extraneous, but whatever. And then they realize Astra is actually the sixth segment of the key to time, because they use this material to complete the time. The time loop's widening. So basically, they turn Astra into the sixth segment. They put the stuff together. The Doctor deflects the missiles so that they destroy the third planet once the time loop collapses. And then they put the segments together. The Black Guardian's there. He tries to get the segment. The Doctor splits apart the key to time just at the last minute, and then installs the randomizer, and then the Black Guardian can't distract them.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I was so worried for you when it was like 10 seconds to go, and you hadn't mentioned the Black Guardian, which is about appropriate for like where he comes in, like how short that last scene is. It's kind of amazing. But yes, you got to the word randomizer at exactly 3 minutes. Yeah. Which I think is so perfect for our show and for our purposes here. Yes, the randomizer is born in like 2 lines at the end of Armageddon Factor. Now, first of all, had you seen this before?
Yes. Yeah, I'd seen it before.
I had not. Although
you're a Tom Baker fan.
I know, and I just never. I knew that I would have to work through the key to time to get through to this. Right. So I never did it. I saw the.
Did you feel you'd seen enough of the key to time to?
Yes. But I also realized that I have seen some of this before, which is that wonderful negative image of the Black Guardian was also in Legopolis, and I remember being just scared like crazy of those few seconds of that negative image. It's a terrifying image.
Yeah, there's something about going negative.
Yeah,
that is kind of freaky, and it's kind of like why the Daleks.
No, thumbs down for negative. Yeah.
Okay. If you're watching on YouTube, the thumbs up thing just came up again.
Again.
Offline, I'm gonna show you how to turn that off. But yeah, the Daleks' ray gun effect was going negative for the longest time, which again had sort of an eerie effect. There's something just sort of really alien about it, this sort of uncanny valley of seeing the world but flipped, right? It's sort of also why the upside down works so well in Stranger Things. Not that that's negative, but it's sort of a similar idea that you're seeing the familiar, but just sort of perverted in a sort of way. And this is sort of an easy way of doing that. Yeah, the Black Guardian, I always kind of thought in this episode, though, why he's only in it for like 5 minutes at the end.
Right.
And everyone loves Valentine Dial. He's the guy who comes in, he's got the great voice. But the Shadow is just this poor version of the poor man's version of the Black Guardian.
The Black Guardian, yeah.
And he's just kind of lame. He gets really tiresome. Like the Shadow like really loves repeating his lines. There's a lot of repetition of like the key to time is mine. And it's just like, okay, give it a rest, dude. Like, come on, we know your shtick. He's just not really an interesting villain. Whereas the Black Guardian, once he comes in, it's like, okay, now we're finally getting somewhere.
Yeah, the Shadow is a bit of a Snoke for you, Star Wars sequel trilogy fans.
Right.
In that, yeah, you think he's sort of the big bad. I actually kind of like seeing Valentine Dial come in as at the end, dressed as the White Guardian,
Mm-hmm.
is so creepy. And let's start there in terms of the behind the scenes. That wasn't even supposed to be Valentine Dial. They were going to try to get the dude who was the White Guardian in, is it Ribos or Ribos operation?
Ribos operation.
Yeah. Never knew how to pronounce it.
Ribos. It might be Rebos.
Rebos.
Anyway.
Well, yes, the estate of Bob Holmes, please write in and let us know.
We'll get there when we get there.
We'll get there when we get there.
The randomizer didn't take us there until it's taken us there later.
But they were trying to get that guy back. He wasn't available, and that's when they turned to Valentine Dial, because the idea was going to be that they were the same person, literally. Black Guardian and White Guardian. And that, it was just sort of the dual nature of this one being.
Oh, interesting. Are you sure? I mean, I think it might have been because the whole thing is that he's just fooling them, right? So maybe there are two, but he's just taking the same appearance. It's almost like
that's what it ends up being. Yes.
Oh God, you devil. That's what kind of like what you get, right? Because they're both played by George Burns in that movie, the devil and God.
Yes,
but they are separate.
That was the idea, and it was sort of I believe this is correct. I've read a few things on this. Douglas Adams basically he came in, and his first job, effectively as script editor, was to rewrite that last scene. Originally, in the last scene, the Doctor was supposed to just decide on his own to scatter the parts of the key to time.
Okay.
And the Douglas Adams written scene works so much better, right? That it's actually the Black Guardian, and that the Black Guardian is trying to fool the Doctor into thinking he's the White Guardian. Now, that scene makes no sense if the Doctor's already met the White Guardian and knows what he looks like, right? So I think, as written, it was intended to be the same dude.
Yeah, I guess. It's also, but they also make a big deal about her. Maybe this is why they wrote this, the bit of where Romana is like, that's not the president.
Yes.
And she seems like a little bit dumb in that moment, right? So it sounds like that they put that in to emphasize that he can change his appearance.
Yes. And also the whole idea of the last segment of the Key to Time being a person was, and I believe we talked about this in the Pirate Planet, was how Douglas Adams originally intended to resolve that story. That he had that idea, Douglas Adams just fizzing with ideas, the Stephen Moffat of his day, and this was one idea, and that they Graham Williams, the producer, used for the end of the season. Like,
it's such a good idea, and I like it, because this is almost like the culmination in the puzzle pieces of the Key to Time series. So one of the cool things they did do this season, even though all the stories are very separate, is that they often made the components of the key an interesting part of the plot. So we did Pirate Planet, the fact that the spoiler for Pirate Planet for anyone listening, that the second segment there, is the planet. Even in the first episode, and I've seen it, even though we haven't done it for the podcast. So again, spoiler alert, everyone, that the key ends up being the MacGuffin within the episode. I mean, it's the big MacGuffin for the season, but it's also like another MacGuffin in the episode. So like they did interesting things throughout the season. The only one I think that is uninteresting is probably the one we've already done, which is the
Androids of Tara.
Androids of Tara. It's just some statue. It's just like whatever, and then they just have this fun summary adventure. But here, like having it be a person is like, oh yeah, that's where it's going to culminate. That's where it's like, this is the craziest segment almost. And because it also has that moral implication to it, which of course they explore in the last little bit.
And if you take a meta reading of the show, which kind of we're all doing now, in Shooty's first season, right? It's getting so meta, so literally winking at the audience. Like this is the episode where Tom Baker, who nearly quit, who did actually quit because he wanted more creative control
Right.
over Doctor Who, not only selected his new Romana on the basis of this, but selected his wife, right? This is where he meets Lala Ward, who plays Princess Astra. And so coming to this, as we have done from Destiny of the Daleks, and like that being the stepping on point for me in my Doctor Who fandom, it's so interesting to see Princess Astra for the first time.
To see those scenes with the two of them, though? There's a bunch of scenes, particularly toward the end, where it has Mary Tam and Lala Ward in the same scene.
I know, and I don't know if you also had Mickey Smith in your head going, "Oh, mate, the missus and the ex, welcome to every man's worst nightmare." But yeah, you got to think, like, I was looking for like a Tom Baker scene where he like looks at the two of them. He's like, that one. But there is this moment where he grabs Astra's hand, where she's about to put her hand on the key to time, and he grabs it, and you're like, ooh, the sparks must have been flying there. I see how this happened.
Apparently. But I gotta say, I do like in making her the key to time segment, having that be a moment for Romana to shine, and Mary Tam in particular. I feel like she really gets a chance in the last couple of episodes, and certainly the last couple of scenes there, to do something. Like her moral indignation about the whole thing, like, we're just pawns in this game, and how dare the Guardians even do this? Turn a person or architect, and it's not even just like they did it in the moment. This has obviously clearly been architected throughout thousands of years to put this weird abnormality in their DNA, however they sort of technobabble explain it, that this person ends up being the sixth segment of the key to time. And so she gets really indignant with the Doctor at the end. And I think this is a great moment because it sort of underscores like her naivete. Like she gets to be the college student, frankly, that's her character at this point. So that works. And she sort of does that. And the Doctor is very good and sort of like, look, it sucks, but now we have to save millions of people. Okay. So let's put that aside for a minute. And so he has sort of the right kind of like practical response. So yeah, like that kind of works. I honestly think just structurally, the Pirate Planet and a lot of the first 4 episodes are kind of, but then in the last couple, where I thought, the time loop's kind of interesting, and then they'd have that whole thing with her being the segment, it actually sort of really crescendos in my view, in terms of quality.
And this is, we shouldn't go too far without saying this is Bob Baker and Dave Martin's last collaboration. They did the Invasion of Time, which had a similar, and we've been there, it had a similar 4-2 structure to its 6 episodes, right? You think it's about one thing, and oh no, it's about this other thing. Well, why did we spend 4 episodes on that one thing? Kind of, you'd think they would have learned from that there, Professor Hater, but no.
They commissioned them. Got to pad it up.
By the way, we're very close to a Bob Baker and Dave Martin bingo.
That's true.
We've done, and to was it Bob Baker on his own who did Nightmare of Eden?
That's right.
Yeah.
What are we missing?
Underworld.
Oh, I can't wait. No, I didn't say that, Randomizer. No. But yeah, so like, let's talk a little bit about the first 4 episodes. We've been sort of talking a lot about the end here. So I will say it starts off decently with this war. Like the first scene is that soap opera, right?
I love that.
That's a nice little tone setter.
Yeah.
It's like, okay. And then you're introduced to the Marshal, who's actually very good. I will give a lot of points to, I guess it's John Woodvine.
Yes.
And he really understood the assignment, this sort of blowhardy guy, and in the sort of spirit of Winston Churchill, he's like, we're going to fight on and fight on and fight on. And there's going to be no quarter given, and we'll never compromise or surrender.
He consciously echoes Churchill's speech patterns for that speech at the beginning. And then you cut to him, and he's like this Lee Marvin-esque guy. That was really kind of a thing in the 70s, wasn't it? Like, those crusty, silver-haired action heroes.
Totally.
He's very much one of those.
It's a little like Leslie Nielsen, he reminded me of a bit.
Yes.
Like, that's not quite as... Like, because he's both very serious, and the comedy comes from the seriousness. And I think... they're not playing up the laughs here, but he is more of a caricature than a character.
And to that point, he has the largest epaulettes on his shoulders ever seen in any costume in Doctor Who. I mean, the tassels are fabulous. Gotta say, good job on that costume department. The Marshal, like, they really dial up the sort of oblivious military nature of the Marshal, often reflected in the fact saying, the Doctor says things like, oh, you have a keen military mind, using it as an insult, and the Marshal takes it as a compliment.
Well, I like that you used the
moment.
word reflected. That was very apt because all that stuff with him in the mirror, I gotta say, somehow it works, even though it's very stage play and he's kind of just going there to meditate. I like it because it's more interesting than going to some chamber and then doing some bad special effect. I think they sort of get away with the low tech, low budgetness of it. But I also like that it's kind of public and that Shap just kind of goes with it. Like that's kind of says a lot about Shap's character too, right?
Shap is like every overworked, underappreciated, assistant to the regional manager. Like he wears his contempt on his sleeve, but
he just seems so bored.
Yeah,
with everything.
He really does.
And I love the way he delivers attack. He just doesn't. There's no like. It's completely the opposite of the Marshal. Like the Marshal would be yelling it, screaming into the microphone, and he's just like, just as you would, we need more dog food on shelf 7. Bring it.
Yeah, there are a few actors who aren't necessarily bringing their all here, but that might actually work to the story's benefit.
But that's what I mean. I think it's a choice, and I think it's a good choice that he's sort of just this bored guy and doesn't really like his job, doesn't like what he's doing, knows the Marshal's kind of nuts because he's staring at this mirror all the time, but can't really do anything about it. And
he's the leader. What are you going to do? Yeah, and everyone kind of joins in on that. Like when one guy says, oh, your escape pod. I mean, your ship is ready, sir.
Yeah,
like
that was such a neat little line. I almost got dragged down that rabbit hole a little bit in the TLDW when I talked because it just really sticks out at you. Yeah,
indeed. But yes, love the mirror. Speaking of rabbit holes that we can get dragged down, I don't want to get too far into the podcast before we talk about Drax. Because the way that I watched this, I kind of paused it in that. Which episode does Drax come in? Is it 4 or 5?
I believe it's 5.
5, okay.
Because the episode 4, as I recall, ends with the Shadow petting K9.
Yes.
Declaring the key to time would be his, I believe, or some similar line.
Yeah, good episode for K9, by the way. We haven't really talked about that.
That's true.
Yeah, you really feel John Leeson had a bond with Mary Tam and even with Tom Baker.
But the Shadow's expecting them to come to the planet of evil. TM. TM. Planet of Evil. But they go there, and that's when the Doctor obviously encounters Drax.
Where he encounters Drax. So I paused it right before then. And then I pick it up with Drax just sort of coming out of the... as he kind of really does in the show. Like, it really accentuated, when I came back to it, like, the next day, to have Drax just sort of suddenly jump out, and you're like, hang on, what? There's another Time Lord in this? And he just, like, have I skipped ahead? Because sometimes BritBox will do this. By the way, folks, I did cave and buy another month of BritBox. For those of you who've been following my boycott.
So you didn't do Tubi or wherever it is?
No, can't stand the ads. So you got me, BritBox, you got me. Anyway, like sometimes it skips ahead.
Your support, folks.
I know, please support our BritBox habit. But he just, like, sometimes it skips ahead to the next episode, right? Without you intending it to. Thumbs up for BritBox, apparently. But I felt like that's what it done here. Like, hang on, I'm not even watching the same episode. But no, Drax just does come out of nowhere. And what's the first thing he says? The Doctor's name! The Doctor's bloody name!
In a Cockney accent.
In a bloody Brixton accent!
Brixton, yes. That's where he's from. He spent a great deal of time in Brixton.
Which is just like, that's such a wonderful contrast with New Who, right? Like, he's basically got David Tennant's accent, and but you feel the need to have to explain it next to posh Tom Baker, because all the Doctors are posh at that point.
Okay, so Drax, yes.
That was I will just say this, and Stephen Moffat has agreed with this. Like, that was originally intended to be the name of the Doctor.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about that. So let's talk about the name of the Doctor. So yeah, he calls him Theta Sigma.
Theta Sigma.
And there's this obsession with Greek lettering in the alphabet in the classic series in this period and its relation to Gallifrey, to the point where even if you read the discontinuity guide, there's like some speculation that could hint at a connection to Earth somehow in Gallifrey's history. I don't know if I'm dying to see anything like that. It just seems like
no.
I'm glad they kind of ignored it and then retconned it that it was his nickname.
Yes, they retconned it, by the way, in the Happiness Patrol, the Sylvester McCoy episode, where the Doctor meets another character named Sigma, and that's his excuse to get this in, which very much speaks to the fan-led, obscurity of the McCoy era.
Right. Well, and certainly there's the fan-led obscurity of this being the Doctor's name.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone really accepted it because it's just done interesting. No. I mean, so you could argue, okay, looking at Theta and Sigma.
Yes.
Like
what they mean.
Yeah. What do they mean? Well, you take Theta. I'll take Sigma.
Okay. No, you take Theta because Theta is coming obliquely at an angle at something, right?
Exactly. It has to do with that kind of geometry where, theta often represents whatever angle you're at if you're doing sort of equations and stuff. So it can certainly have that meaning of like coming things from a new angle, a different angle, an interesting angle, which I think suits the Doctor.
Yeah.
Kind of makes sense.
I love that.
It's not as predictable.
And what is he coming at an interesting angle at? Sigma, which in math means it includes all terms in the sum, which is a wonderful thing for the Doctor. It includes everything.
Yeah, it's a big summation term. You use the capital Sigma in front of a lot of equations to summarize things. I took engineering way back in my undergrad, so I remember doing thetas and sigmas all the time.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, you can tell an engineer probably wrote this, but I mean, there's this the Sigma thing makes a little more sense almost than this theta thing, because like the Doctor even says there's a line in the Five Doctors where it's like a man is the sum of his memories, the Time Lord even more so. And if you think of that as he has this summation of experience, which makes him so great, really, at doing all these things.
Now, post-Timeless Child, all of Gallifrey had the Doctor's DNA. All Time Lords have the Doctor's DNA. So, yeah, that's even more appropriate. So I gotta say, like, we may have to just retcon the Happiness Patrol. I'm like, sorry, folks, this is the Doctor's name.
Well, you're the one making that case, not me.
Given that we just went there in
action, it's a little more apt than you might think.
I mean, let us not forget that we just went there again. RTD went there again at the end of Space Babies, where the Doctor's walking out of the TARDIS like, oh, my people had grand names like the Bishop, but what they originally called me was ... So this is now my headcanon. That he's telling Ruby's family that he used to be called Theta Sigma.
Well, it's funny, then why was he reacting so like over the top to River knowing his name in the library? Because, well, Drax knows it. They'd have to retcon that somehow.
Yeah, maybe the Doctor was just sexist at that point, and he's just like, oh, I would never tell that name to a girl, not unless I was marrying her. Which apparently, maybe that was part of the wedding with Lala Ward. He just, at one point, he leans over to her and says, my real name's Theta Sigma.
Oh, wow. There you go. Ladies every time.
Yep.
So back to Drax. So Drax has probably been criticized a lot as being kind of this weird idea that doesn't work because we've never seen him again.
Yes.
Everyone's followed up on Drax. I don't know if the actor has ever been asked to do a big finish or if I'm not sure if he's even still around. I don't know.
Come on, big finish. Call him.
Unpopular opinion. I might be standing alone here. Drax is great. I love Drax. He is unexpected and bizarre. And your feeling that you had, like, what is this? Am I in a different show? That's actually what I love about him. And that it's this crazy wild card that they just pull out of nowhere. And it's like, but as a character and a plot twist, I think it's awesome that Doctor Who plays these cards. And it's kind of a little bit part of the show, but especially during this season, and I'll just, again, I don't want to spoiler alert too many other Key to Time episodes, but in the Stones of Blood, which sort of starts off as kind of like a quasi-horror episode, there's this weird turn halfway through that story. And I love that Doctor Who does that, honestly, that they just kind of like, you can flip things and suddenly, oh, you thought you were watching this kind of adventure. Now you're watching this one. And I will say this, his presence, Drax's presence, it injects like life into what, again, I would say has been a fairly plotting story for the first 4 episodes. And what it does too, it sort of changes Tom Baker's performance because he has so many scenes with Drax. And so because this guy's a goofy kind of comical character and kind of a delight in my view anyway, and that's the way he speaks, Tom Baker suddenly gets louder in a lot of scenes, and he's kind of yelling at Drax and getting irritated. It might be actually Tom Baker getting irritated that this guy's like trying to steal the scene, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Drax kind of creates this weird high energy and sort of this chaos in the adventure that for me it totally worked.
But it is perfect for, like, you know, Tom Baker being irritated at Drax is perfect for, like, if you're just in the middle of, like, showing off in front of your girlfriend and you're doing this really adult thing, and then a friend from school comes up and you're like, go away, dude. And you're like, you know, like, no, I don't want your, like, this avoiding your school reunion kind of thing, kind of moment here. Like, oh, no, I don't want you to remind me of what I was. I was just, you know, spotty little Theta Sigma. Like, I'm not that now. I'm the Doctor. You know?
Yeah, totally. And he's like, even does things wrong. Like he zaps the Doctor instead of the mute. And it is like, oh yeah, why would you do that? And I guess they sort of use it later to get into K9 and stuff.
I was going to say, you did say in your TLDW, you did say that was an extraneous plot point to have Drax turning them both into Planet of Giants style, you know, mini people. But then that does allow I think we may have a bingo here on Troy references.
Oh, okay. Because
the Doctor says to Drax, "Have you ever heard of Troy?" And then they get into the Shadow's lair, secreted inside K9. K9 is the Trojan horse. And of course, the Randomizer, we know the Randomizer loves Troy because it took us the Mythmakers pretty early on.
Well, it's also lucky that Merak was doing this thing right that second, because him busting in through the wall kind of makes no sense unless he was actually trying to save them. And it's like, oh, I don't know. Didn't see the meeting where they actually coordinated that.
Yes. I actually have a question for you. Something wasn't clear from the story for me. Was K9 ever really turned, or he was just fooling the Shadow?
Well, that's never really explained. I don't know either. So there are a few things that it feels like there's a missing scene where maybe the Doctor confronts K9 somehow and like then rewires him again or something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because why would the Shadow think he's been turned? Like he has those control devices, but you know, it doesn't really make sense that K9 would be controlled by something like that if it's designed to control people. So yeah, there's something missing there. By the way, the whole thing where the Doctor just takes it off, you know, like I think it's episode 2 or 3. Like the Shadow's like, I'm going to put this on you and you're going to listen to me. He's like, I don't think so.
Yeah, no.
Which is a bit like I get the sense again, Tom Baker probably just put that in.
Yeah.
You know, because one, you can't really have that happen to the Doctor as your lead, at least not for any appreciable amount of time. And then, but just to kind of like whip it off, like, oh, it doesn't work on me. Oh, okay. Well, you'd think they would have planned for that.
It is kind of a meta moment because, again, here we have another classic new Who, old Who situation where, you know, the props department is doing one thing and they may not have read the script because the script talks about this completely inobtrusive thing that's on the neck of the Marshal. And it's this giant, like, piece of green plastic. Like, that's not inobtrusive. Although I have to say, as a guy who recently went on vacation over the Memorial Day weekend and came back with a tick stuck in my arm that I didn't notice.
Oh, no.
Despite going back past giant billboards on the 101 freeway with giant ticks on them, literally saying, check yourself for ticks. I did not notice my ticks. So I kind of like, yeah, that could have been a bit less obtrusive, but also I can buy it. I didn't notice I had this thing burrow into my skin. I can buy it.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think they made it large because we always got to remember that TVs were like 480i back then, right? And they were 19-inch at the best, and you had to have something fairly large. So
Yeah.
I don't mind it so much. I do think, just to say one more thing on Drax, I re- I wonder like what his deal is, because
What's the deal
well,
with
it's like
Drax?
they sort of at this point in the classic series, the Doctor's given his freedom because he saved everyone on Gallifrey, right? The Master's a rogue, so is the Ronnie, even though the Ronnie isn't around yet. In other words, like there aren't like Time Lords out in the universe doing stuff as their job, and it's just like, clearly not Drax's job because he's like kind of this con man who goes around doing jobs. It's like the Time Lord's okay with that. Is he? I guess he's a rogue, but not really. Like, what is he doing?
Well, he's also selling arms,
Right.
which makes me think that he's the DJ character in The Last Jedi. For all you Star Wars fans, don't join. Like he's selling weapons to both sides and just cashing in.
Yeah. Wouldn't the Time Lords not like that? I don't know. Again,
Yeah.
like I like
That's
Drax.
why you never see Drax again. The Time Lords got him. They erased him from the timeline.
There you go.
They somehow took the Doctor's name with him.
Yeah. But speaking of things that make the last part of this story interesting, I really like the time loop.
Yeah, me
when they
too.
put together, it's a really great moment in my view when the Doctor sort of realizes, oh my God, the Marshal's coming. This whole place is going to blow up. We need to pull a rabbit out of our hat. And he realizes he has the key to time, and he just makes another piece and puts it together. And you're like, oh, that actually makes some kind of sense.
Yeah.
And then he turns it on and you're not quite sure what it's doing. They don't fully explain it, which is obviously intentional. And then it's like, fire, fire, fire.
Yeah.
Probably the most repeated line, even on top of the shadows.
At that point, I did wonder if BritBox was glitching as well. Like, wait, we just seem to be repeating the same. And you kind of get it. Like, I mean, for the limited budget, it's a pretty good way to explain a time loop.
Yeah. Well, and also just like how the plot of this episode reaches out into the arc plot, into the the larger key to time plot, and pulls this out in a believable way. So it's almost like they've used the whole season to earn this moment. And even though it invites a lot of questions, I think they're good questions. Like one of them is that the how the key to time works, right? It's like, oh, so it's not like a machine. There's no moving parts. There's no circuitry. There's some weird magic in the way the shapes fit together. And that's a little silly, certainly, but it's also like, I don't know if Chris Bidmead was working for the show at this point. It just sounds like something he would come up with.
Yeah. He's sort of this little assistant in the back going, can we call it a chronic hysteresis?
And then they use the tracer to put them all together. And you can headcanon this easily. It's almost like the Infinity Gauntlet in the Avengers movies, right? Oh yeah, you need something to sort of put it all together, and then the Doctor commands it, and presumably the tracer is sort of doing a little bit of real-time translation into the thing, and it's figuring it out. And it makes you wonder a little bit, like, what's the security on this thing? And anyone within earshot just kind of start commanding it? Because the Black Guardian, you think it could just start yelling at the thing and do it, but presumably whoever put the tracer in, maybe it just sort of gravitates to them or initializes on that person, and then that they're the owner.
Yeah, I got to say the IT security on the key to time, absolutely shocking. I mean, no wonder. If your workplace security was this bad, you would have to scatter your laptop into 6 different parts across the universe. It would make absolute sense to do that. So that's quite a 6-factor authentication.
You just put it on the
process.
galactic blockchain.
Seriously, but yeah, you're absolutely right that we sort of have this conclusion before we have the conclusion. We have the conclusion of what the key to time can do in episode 5.
Yeah.
And that gives us enough time to sort of think about the key to time and what it could possibly do before you get to the point of, and I've got to say, love you, Tom, this is not your best acting moment, but where he does the unlimited power thing. And we sort of later, we learned that it's just the Doctor faking it. He's just pretending to be taken over. Thumbs up
See,
for faking it,
you
Doctor.
inadvertently like it.
I
That's what the YouTube your thumbs up thing is telling you. I liked it. I
Yeah.
do like when he kind of goes to Romana and he's kind of being all goofy, and because it's funny when he just sort of switches back. I don't know. Maybe this
it's a
is me
weird choice.
indexing to when I first saw it.
Yeah.
Decades ago, because I remember laughing out loud the first time I saw that. I thought it was amusing. It's Tom Baker being Tom Baker. Again, I agree with you, not his best, not I would think I would put on his audition tape, but
it's certainly a choice. It's a choice. And one of those choices is like, I didn't realize that, like Tom Baker uses his eyes in his acting all the time. The big, big eyes. And here he's using them while shut, which I don't think I've ever seen. Like he's flicking his eyeballs back and forth. And he has a point in terms of like, it's really easy to see that he's doing that. And it's kind of, done right, it could be kind of creepy. I don't think it kind of works. Maybe it's the stereo lighting. He just looks dumb. But, I respect the choice on that.
So I want to talk about one element of the story that I think is rather underexplored, and it's the no Zeons on Zeos.
Yes.
Because this is a whole nuclear war between two planets that have bombed completely into each other into the Stone Age. So there's a bit of a message going on here, certainly, a very strong anti-war message. And it's interesting the choice of having the Marshal be sort of a Churchill-like figure, because I don't necessarily think, I think there's more of a nuanced thing here than just to say war is bad. And I don't think it's condemning Churchill. I think it is condemning war in a nuclear age, right?
Yes.
Like we can't have it's like the Dr. Strangelove message. You can't have these warmongering and pro-war attitudes when the stakes are global. That's a bad thing, and it's going to lead to complete devastation. So that
they were Baker and Martin were definitely influenced by the Cold War. They made that clear. The original title of their script was just Armageddon, which may be a little too on the nose, and it was Douglas Adams who changed it to the Armageddon Factor. I don't know if he also inserted the line that is one of the most, hey, that's the name of the show lines you'll ever see in Doctor Who. It's almost like the Doctor turns to camera and says, right, the Armageddon Factor.
That's the episode you're watching, everyone.
Say the title, Bart.
But when I think about the Zeon side of it, so it seems pretty clear, like they're dead. There's been a genocide on Zeos prior to even this story that the Doctor and Romana coming there. So that's dark, and they never really explore that much. Everyone just sort of accepts, there's no Zeons on Zeos. But Shap even explicitly says at some point, well, yeah, of course, we used to trade with them and talk to them, and they just looked just like us. They were people, right? Yeah. And it's not even implied, it's said. And so it's like, well, wait a minute, there was a genocide here, and you seem to think that either they were destroyed in one of the initial Atrios strikes, or the Shadow orchestrated that somehow. Like, they never really answer it, and they never really let the audience take that in, that how, like, what that means entirely. It's just they get very lost quickly in the computer, which has a name, that's apparently doing all the strikes.
Yeah, what's it called? Mentios, is it?
Mentalis,
the fresh maker.
That stuff was really of the time.
Yeah.
Like, that was a very 1970s, early 80s computer. I mean, this is when did it broadcast? 79, right? 79. So you think this is post Star Wars, and you can tell because Mentalis communicates through a lot of beeps, and they go on rather a long time, I'll say. So,
oh my goodness, do they ever? Yeah, don't have this show on if you have anything that could, that reacts to the sound of a modem, because there's basically long stretches of modem noise between K9 and Mentios.
Mentalis. Did I get it wrong?
No. I think you're right. I just keep thinking of Mentos. The fresh maker.
So there's a lot of computer on computer action.
There is, yes.
Which, maybe a bit questionable. There's a lot of running around hallways on Zeos, whatever remains of those hallways, I guess. And then there's those mutes chasing people and shooting people. And I got to say, that leads to one of the worst death scenes. And I'm putting death in quotes because the character doesn't die, which is Shap. And it's sort of a shootout with one of the mutes, gets shot, falls backwards in the most like over the top stage play kind of way, and falls down completely manspreaded for the audience.
Yeah, that's a choice. That's a choice for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, if the director was more on the ball, or like if they weren't kind of rushed as they always were in the days of Classic Who, you could imagine the director shouting, "Cut." Okay, interesting choice, Shap Lovey, but let's try that where we're not doing pantomime, okay? Let's take it from the top. But no, it's just like, nope, one take, okay, good, print, cut it, perfect. Director's like Ed Wood, like, yeah, it was great, it was brilliant. Yeah. Poor Shap. But yeah, let's get back to this the threat of nuclear war thing, which because I really like that. I feel like we've discussed this before in this interminable podcast that I like at this at this age, at the end of the 70s, at the beginning of the 80s, like I was really obsessed by and terrified by nuclear war, and I think it was just sort of starting to kick in Britain. Like we're 5 years away from Threads. That groundbreaking nuclear war drama, we're into the heightened tensions of the Cold War. The Russians have invaded Afghanistan. Like it all feels like it's going to kick off even before Reagan comes in and starts saber rattling. And so much of this like has a feel that like I remember sort of layering nuclear war awareness on top of a lot of British TV, like in my very imaginative just imagine they're in a nuclear bunker now. And so I sort of had that a moment at the start of the Armageddon Factor of like, it sort of feels like they're in a nuclear bunker here, he said, reminiscing. And they actually are. Like, it actually is nuclear war. This actually is Threads. And the fact that Doctor Who doesn't have the budget to actually show you that nuclear war actually works in its favor here. Right?
Yeah. You just sort of get the claustrophobia of the survivors and sort of the lousy sort of situation they're in, and then you have the whole radiation room, which is a little little simplistic, but works to sort of get that idea across.
And then a bit of the roof falls in the hospital while they're watching the propaganda movie,
right?
Which is wild, and everyone's just like, "Oh, don't panic, keep calm and carry on."
Exactly.
Which is very much that sort of that British attitude running headlong into a war you can't win.
Yeah.
I love that.
I do think they had good elements of it. I would have liked to have gotten a little more on sort of who, just basically what happened to Zeos, and to feel that a little more, at least somewhere in there. I think they could have dropped at least a little bit of the shadow mute stuff in the few episodes leading up to the time loop, and get a little more in episode, say 3 or 4, about the Zeos being completely gone, and like understanding that they still need to save the people on Atrios.
So another thing, a scene that actually reminded me kind of a lot of Doctor Strangelove, is where the Marshal is sending in his last few ships that are obviously overpowered.
Right.
Like he's sending them to their deaths, and you hear little audio snatches of the crews like on those ships begging to stop. They know this is suicide. And they're doing this. Shall we turn around now, sir? Can we turn around now, sir? Like all of that stuff as they go to their deaths. And knowing what you know about Zeos at the end, you can then, like, a bit like Dot and Bubble, which we talked about in one of our hot takes. The repeatability. Like you go back and you see something more sinister. You see something more sinister there because all those ships that are killing all those people are drones. They're just unmanned. Like there's no Zeons in them. There was no need for that slaughter.
No. In fact, you kind of wonder, like, was it all orchestrated? Like, did they start this war at the very beginning? Did the Shadow do it and annihilate the Zeons on his own, and then just start attacking? Maybe.
Maybe that's kind of left open. It is possible that the quote unquote planet of evil, and like what you couldn't give it a name, or you couldn't reference the. I feel like if it was the Sylvester McCoy era, he'd be like, "Oh yes, the planet of evil. I remember that from when Sarah Jane and I went there," and you'd insert some needless fan reference.
Yeah, and that's a weird choice too, to make it look like a space station, because it's like, well, wait, is it a space station or is it a planet? Is it like the Death Star? You don't really get a good sense of the scale because the Marshals missiles completely destroy it. Well, then it must be fairly small. What? Yeah, why call it a planet? I don't think that was a little that was a little confusing.
I do want to say one more thing because I see some questions maybe hoving into view.
Covering.
But I want to give a shout out to Mary Tam in this episode in that dress.
Oh yeah,
is stunning, and her hair is on point. And Mary Tam in this episode, like, she may have just become my biggest classic Who crush. Sorry, Zoe. Sorry,
she gets
Mary
to use
Jane.
a little Venusian karate as well.
Yes,
or what, some version of maybe it's Gallifreyan karate, but she like subdues Merak with some kind of nerve pinch hold and gets the tracer back from him.
And that dress plus the tracer, which kind of looks so lightsabery, like it does feel like they're consciously echoing Star Wars there.
100%.
But I don't care. She's a stunner. She's a knockout, and it is such a shame that she was underused in this season, and that she wasn't invited back for the regeneration.
No question, my friend. But now we have to move on to some other questions, which are, of course, the 4 questions to Doomsday. All right, first question. Why did the randomizer take us here? Apart from the obvious.
Apart from the birth of the randomizer, let it be known that June the 1st, the day we're recording this, is the randomizer's birthday going forward. Or at least we'll just consider it the randomizer's birthday from this point. So it wanted us to see it being born and the circumstances surrounding that. It's interesting. I sort of had this in mind for maybe this would be, if the randomizer is sentient, like maybe this is a candidate for last one it takes us to.
Right. Sort of like,
like
Ouroboros.
Yes.
I certainly thought that, like, it's just too apt. We could just end the question there about it being the randomizer's first story. But
there's also genocide, which we saw recently in Flux. And is also hinted at in Shooties, or at least in Space Baby's not quite in church on Ruby Road, but the randomizer is probably also thinking of the fact that the Time Lords have just gotten genocided again. And then I almost got kind of Boom vibes as well, a little from this.
A little bit, yeah. It's sort of a war that you don't really know the nature of that's going on around our heroes, and they're sort of needing to, partly to save themselves, but to figure out what's going on here and kind of solve it for everyone. I think that's it. And it's kind of like, that to me is like one connection. So it's not a Doctor Who connection, but there's a similarly titled episode of the original Star Trek, which is called A Taste of Armageddon. And it's all about how the Enterprise crew is pulled into a war between planets. And it's kind of a nuclear war, but not. So I won't spoil that one. It's actually one of my favorite episodes of the original Star Trek. And this isn't really a spoiler, they get pulled into this interplanetary war, and they need to solve the war to save themselves. So in this case, there's some of that, but there's also, they need to solve the war to get to the 6th segment. So very similarly structured. So that's one thing I thought of. The other thing I thought of, to sort of connect it to our recent adventures, is that it's that moment I talked about earlier where the Romana gets indignant and emotional with the Doctor, and she's overcome with it to the point where she's not really thinking. And the Doctor needing to be sort of the person who, stays steady and on point and on mission. And so that very much echoes Thin Ice, where
the Doctor says we need to do that, and then completely loses his cool.
And that's later, right? And that's that episode, and we talked about it then. But that is a great moment in Thin Ice where he talks, and we talked about that at length too, how it peels back a little bit of the layers of the 12th Doctor. and Bill sort of losing it over the dead kid, and
Yes.
he grabs the Sonic when he can't save him. It's like you have sort of a similar sort of moment there in episode 6 in Armageddon Factor. So that was my connection.
I like that. Yes. Well, definitely, this is, if you're going to have your genocide off screen, I think the randomizer is saying, compare this off screen genocide to the off screen genocide in Flux, which is just so much is going on, you don't even realize that all the dogs have been killed.
Like in Missing almost.
Yeah, but here it's still subtle, but it's kind of done right, like Missing Xeons. You get that sense that it's happened in the background, which again, dot and bubble vibes. Something has happened in the background here. The population of Zeos, just like the population of Homeworld and Dot and Bubble, 0.
That's right. In both cases, we're talking about the evil of genocide, and that is an apt way to jump to the second question, which of course is, what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Yeah, well, we have 2 potential evil plots here, right? One, the Black Guardian.
Yeah.
One, the Marshals.
Sure. Mm-hmm. So which
even
one
though the
should we do
Marshals
first?
are controlled by the Black Guardian. I mean, Black Guardian is the ultimate big bad, so let's talk about him.
He's the manipulator.
Yeah.
Yeah, so presumably if it succeeds, maybe the Black Guardian isn't so dumb and somehow fools the Doctor at the end.
Yes.
And does that mean the universe is over? Because basically it means like Thanos has the Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like, he's going to just use it and do, I think he talks about he wants chaos to reign or whatever, whereas the White Guardian wanted to restore balance by stopping time. And there's a whole theory, right? It was actually, I think, first voiced in the Discontinuity Guide that maybe the Doctor split the key apart too early, which leads to Logopolis, so the White Guardian never actually does do the thing that the Doctor just presumes he does it, right? Like, well, we've had the key together and the White Guardian's had enough time to do it, so let's do it. But if the White Guardian can just do that, why couldn't the Black Guardian just do that? You know what I mean? Like, this is the whole security and control of the key. Like who? Why does one get it but not the other?
Yeah, it's not cryptography with this key, people.
But again, getting back, if the evil plot succeeds, the Black Guardian gets it, and then it just becomes a whole us versus Thanos thing. I mean, it becomes like Avengers Endgame. I guess that's what the series is.
Right. I love that idea of then you'd have this Endgame version where the Doctor and Romana are trying to figure out how they can go back in time to prevent that from happening. And maybe there's sort of a moment where they come in and they remove their previous selves from the TARDIS console room at that point, like sort of like the moment where Cap knocks out Cap in Endgame, Dr. Romana just knock out the Doctor and Romana, drag him off, and that's
a scarf.
Yeah, and that's actually what we see. So the evil plot did succeed, but they managed to go back in time and figure out a way to stop it succeeding at that moment.
Perfect. Boom. And Logopolis still happens.
Yes. And if the Marshals succeeded, well, big bada boom.
So that means they don't get the time loop done in time, and boom. So that means Mentalis explodes. I forget what that does. I sort of stumbled over that in the TLDW. So it's like the countdown in the computer room is going to set something off that blows up the whole star system or something.
Something like that. Yeah. Certainly, you gotta figure no Time Lords would survive that. So Drax definitely dead. Probably dead anyway. But definitely dead now. And the Doctor, just a big the end comes up. And Doctor Who ends in 1979.
I mean, we did just find out his name, so
yes,
it is kind of like, okay, what other mysteries are there, people?
Yeah, that's it. Mic drop. We're done. We're done here. Yes.
All right.
And the show would forevermore be known as the Theta Sigma Show.
Oh, that should have been
Theta Sigma.
Could have been the final question, but no, we have other questions, and we're moving on to the third one, which of course is, where is the Clara Splinter. Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of the name of the Doctor. She is somewhere in every single Doctor Who story. Where is she in the Armageddon Factor?
Well, okay, so you know that I'm coming at this from a Destiny of the Daleks perspective, right? Because I can't get over the two Romanas being on screen at once. Which, by the way, I wonder if that's another reason why the randomizer took us here with the Boom connection, where we got Shruti's season 2 companion appearing in Boom early, apparently in a different role. Maybe.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Well, that's what they're suggesting. They're suggesting that this is just, God, I forget what the analogy is, but it's Capaldi essentially. Yeah. So like there was so long between her in this episode and then her being cast, and she just did such a good job for her audition as the companion. It's like, oh yeah, let's bring her back. So there's no intent to link the characters, but maybe that'll come later, as they did with Capaldi.
Yes, well, we can all headcanon it, and what is the Clara Splinter segment in our show if not headcanoning? So here's my headcanon. Time Lady Clara, we've talked about her before, we've seen her, she's the one who encourages William Hartnell to take that particular beat-up, knackered old Type 40. She just shows up on Zeus at opportune moments, kind of like Drax. Perhaps maybe even that's her cover story for why she's there. She's told the Time Lords that she's hunting down Drax, and she will eliminate his memory and she will wipe him from the time streams. That's why we never see him again. But she's also, at opportune moments that we don't see on screen, coming to Romana and kind of whispering at her ear, and kind of after she's met Princess Astra, she's kind of like, hey, Princess Astra's pretty cool, right? I mean, she's got quite a look. She may be a bit more sort of mousy and shorter than you, but wouldn't you like to look like her? Wouldn't you like to burn through a few regenerations just to get to exactly look like her?
Yeah, twice, if you think about it, if that's what she's doing. Yeah, okay. I can see that. She's getting the power of suggestion of how cool Princess Astra is, which...
So really I'm using this to cover up plot holes in Destiny of the Daleks rather than the Armageddon Factor. But I think she can do double duty, Time Lady Clara, because I think she can wipe out Drax as well.
She just really liked that dress. As good as she looked in the white one, that purple number, like very regal, I guess. I don't know. I'm glad actually we didn't see that again. So I was thinking, so you remember we talked about the mirror that the Marshal talks to, and at some point we actually see what's behind the mirror, which is like he's got a skull room, for lack of a better word, right? Like basically the shadow is talking to him through this skull. And
very image of the Fendal, right?
Yeah, it's like this kind of like psychic connection, clearly. There's some implication that this is it. And so it's like, okay, so I find it weird that nobody has like asked like what's behind the wall or even checked it out, or even Shap on some just to alleviate his boredom, like why is he staring at that? What's in that room? So
why is this mirror so beaten up?
I gotta think Clara's in charge of security for the skull room.
Yeah,
because she's keeping everybody out, nobody gets to know what's in there. And when Romana and Merak show up, or I forget, I think it's them that actually go behind and see what it is.
Yep.
She just takes her break, like right then, because she's of course Clara. She wants to help the Doctor and help them put it together. So that is the thing. She's in charge of security at the Skull Room.
Yeah, and that's the real reason why Time Lady Clara has to go after Drax, by the way, because she, as a person who has literally just heard the Doctor say, the name you choose, it's a promise. My name doesn't matter. She's like taking that to heart. This may be the first Clara Splinter, and she's making it her mission to wipe out all mentions of the Doctor's real name in the cosmos, because it just... you don't want to call him boring old Theta Sigma. You want that mystery, and you want him to be the name he chooses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No
more dead naming, people. No more dead naming.
Speaking of choices, you, sir, whoever you are, and madam, and non-binary people, if you are on YouTube, you can like and subscribe this video. You can choose to do that. You can also choose to become a true companion of Pull to Open, which we mentioned earlier here on YouTube, or even at the contribute at the Viscount level. And hey, you can join us for a podcast and give your thoughts on an episode. Check out our website. It is called pulltoopen.net, and there you can subscribe to our newsletter, which includes full notes on every single random episode we talk about. And of course, as I said earlier, you can also support us on Patreon. We are at patreon.com/pulltoopen. Oh, hey, don't forget the socials, of course. TikTok,
Yes.
Pull to Open, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Pull to Open 63, and Blue Sky, also Pull to Open.
And if you don't remember any of those, Google it.
It is now time for the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for the Armageddon Factor. What did we think of this story? The Pull to Open rating system has 6 ratings. There's the Dalek, which we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. There's the Ogron, which we give to an irredeemably bad episode of Doctor Who. There's the Professor Hater, which we give to an episode that isn't so great, but hey, at least they tried something. Then there's the Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. The Fixed Point in Time, which is a story that is beyond rating, often for reasons of nostalgia. And the Lady Cassandra, which is a paper-thin plot, but hey, at least it looks great, especially with a little moisturizing.
Wow. Okay. Well, I had a hard time with this one. I kind of went through a bunch of ratings.
I'm
may remember
sensing a hybrid.
Possibly a hybrid. But you may remember that for Destiny of the Daleks, that's when I came up with the Fixed Point in Time rating. Because it was just so nostalgic to me that even though it was a objectively crap story, I couldn't rate it as such. I'm almost tempted to do that for Armageddon Factor here because it leads into that, because it's connected to that, because of the Black Guardian, and because, quite frankly, the randomizer, like the randomizer itself, is born here. But I think a Fixed Point in Time is only a way to get out of saying that it's not a good episode. I think there's enough good here to have one half of the hybrid, you guessed it, be a Dalek.
Wow.
I think there's enough here, especially in the sense, like, again, it's like a Meglos Dalek. We talked about this with Delta and the Bannerman. Like, there are two sides to the Dalek. One that's actually good, another that's good to, it's sort of so bad it's good, and you can sit around and laugh at it with friends. This is definitely a good one to watch with friends. I'll just say that. So I think it is part Dalek, part Hater, because there are just some wrong things that they learned not to do. They certainly learned not to keep Valentine Dahl out of the picture for so long, and loved him so much they brought him back and put a bird on him.
That's what we do with all of our good friends.
Yeah, so there is Dalek
bird. Dalek Hater. Is that what you said?
That Dalek Hater, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to go a fixed Dalek in time or something.
No. I mean, I was also thinking maybe Lady Cassandra, because it does have some kind of pretty scenes that could be good in the background. But no, I think half Dalek, half Hater, pretty good. But they also learned not to do a lot of things, including not to ever mention the Doctor's name.
True. Okay. So, before I give my rating, I just want to say my daughter liked it. She said she liked it anyway. I got the sense she might have been being a good sport, but she was engaged for much of it. Even she was talked about how the beeps that we were criticizing earlier, those were unnecessary.
Are you saying Grace might be your shap?
Might be a little bit. She liked the Marshal, and that she observed he's good at lying. In the sense that his whole plot to sort of get rid of Astra early on, and she kind of was like bewildered by Merak, who was very impulsive if he has any character trait at all, and she just said he's kind of crazy. So it was she was definitely a keen observer of the characters in this one. So I will give basically the same rating as you did. I think this episode takes a while to get going. Like, it starts off reasonably strong, plods along for 3 episodes, and then really delivers something interesting in the last 2. So I was tempted to give it a full Dalek, but there's just too much of that silliness, and the shadow, the lean on the shadow as your main villain for that long just really makes it suffer. So it was mostly Professor Hater until the end, but it's worth staying till the end because there's some really cool stuff. So it's a Hater Dalek hybrid for me too.
Well, mine's a Dalek Hater, and yours is a Hater Dalek.
Oh wow!
And I think that I think that we should go to war over these differences. I'll be launching my missile shortly, sir.
All right. Well, now that hostilities have been declared, it is probably time for us to get out of here before there is a mushroom cloud.
That's right. And also, the Black Guardian might be on our tails.
Oh,
now. So let's fit a randomizer to our console.
Let's do it.
You know what? Let's retroactively make every episode of this podcast random.
Let's do it.
Yeah, you may remember people. You may have a brief memory of Pull to Open as a show that goes through all of Doctor Who in sequential order. Well, sorry, we're fixing that right now. We're retconning everything. Every episode will now be in random order,
and now your memories will change.
Yeah, exactly.
Now that we've done it.
Yep. All right.
Okay, the randomizer, of course, in our case, was composed of two components. And one is the Codex, which is a list of Doctor Who episodes in sequential order, which I'm holding in front of me now. And the second part is the Executor.
Yes, the Executor, played by Random.org, which does bespoke randomness based on atmospheric noise and number of drone ships entering the atmosphere from Zeos. At this moment, but we do have to plug some numbers into it first. And Pete, where are we on the Codex? Because we should add Dot and Bubble.
We did,
which we've both seen. It is theoretically possible for us on June the 1st to select Rogue, and I have already seen it. You have not. Should we add Rogue to the Codex?
We can. I'm totally cool with that. That's going to increase our count.
Yeah.
Now we are at 190.
190. It's feeling a little like a time loop in here. We keep going back to that number. Almost like it's appearing on a bad 70s computer screen. But before, so we will select a random number from random.org between 1 and 90. That is the moment of the Executor. But before we do that, we like to issue some challenges or requests or prayers to the randomizer, either where we do want to go or don't want to go. So, Pete, what do you got?
Well, you activated something in me about the bad computer effects. So, there's plenty of those, particularly in the 1980s. So I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to say take us to bad computer effects. Take us to the 1980s. Something in there. I'm feeling very 80s.
You're feeling 80s. Well, I'm going to say I'm feeling 70s.
Oh, we're doing decades.
As a 70s kid, yeah, we're doing it. We're once again, like the Hater Dalek Hater, we're finding that very thin dividing line between us.
Wow.
And you started watching Who in the 80s, I started watching it in the 70s.
It can't fulfill both of our requests by definition, unless it takes us to a unit episode.
It's the dating controversy. Yeah, I love it. Yes.
We got to roll the dice on this.
70s or 80s, depending on the dating protocol. It can no longer take us to Day of the Doctor, which is where they said that. True. But yes, okay. Right. Watch it take us to the 60s or this would be a great moment to go to the TV movie, wouldn't it?
All right, ready for a countdown?
Yep.
In 4, 3, 2, 1.
Unstable.
113.
Ooh.
I think we're in the wish.
Partners in crime.
Listen to neither of us.
It's time for more Tennant and Tate. In fact,
right.
Well, the second outing, but we did their first some time ago. Now.
Oh my God, Pete! I wonder.
Their first reunion.
I wonder if the randomizer knows something about the conclusion to Shooty's season.
You're not giving us a spoiler here, are you?
No.
Speculation.
I want to be clear. I've only seen screeners for up to and including Rogue. Not seen anything after that. If I am correct, then you feel free all to gasp in awe at my incredible prediction skills. But if we get Dr. 14 appearing at the end of Ncuti's season, if we get Tennant back in, then yeah, this would be very interesting choice by the randomizer to signal.
Well, this is good. This has definitely come up in context in a couple other episodes, particularly when we talk about Donna and her relationship. So it's like I'm looking forward to seeing this again.
I'm looking forward to seeing the adipose again.
Yeah,
it's been a long time.
That's right. I may have some decorations in the background that are special for that, but that'll have to wait till next time. Dear listener, this has been Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Podcasts are great things to follow, subscribe to, give a star rating for, or review, which we talked about before. Please follow us on the socials that we mentioned before, and come on back for either our hot takes, but they might be they might be exhausted by this point when you hear this, but certainly come back for more random fun, which we're going to give you week after week here on Pull to Open.
That's right. Join us and our new sponsor, Adipose Industries, as we take you back in time next week. Take care, folks.